The waves crashed against the sides of the merchant ships, a relentless assault mirroring the unseen danger lurking beneath the surface. A convoy, a lifeline of supplies desperately needed across the Atlantic, plowed through the icy waters. Suddenly, a deafening explosion ripped through the hull of one vessel. A German U-boat, a predator of the deep, had struck. Panic flared. The ships, laden with vital cargo, were sitting ducks, their vulnerability stark against the vast, unforgiving ocean. What would it take to keep these essential supplies flowing, to protect these fragile vessels from the silent menace that stalked them from below? Far from the chaos of the Atlantic, in a bustling naval shipyard nestled on the American coast, worked a man named Peter. He was a repairman, one of the countless unsung heroes who toiled tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring the war machine kept turning. Peter was an immigrant, a quiet, unassuming man with hands calloused from years of working with metal. He possessed a deep understanding of its properties, a sixth sense almost, for how it would bend, break, and hold. He wasn't a flashy figure, no medals adorned his chest, and his name rarely echoed in the halls of power. He was just Peter, a face in the crowd, an ordinary man in extraordinary times. But beneath his humble exterior lay a dedication bordering on obsession. He approached every task with meticulous care, scrutinizing every weld, every bolt, every connection. He wasn't driven by ambition or the pursuit of glory, but by a profound sense of responsibility. He knew the ships he helped repair were vital links in a chain that stretched across the ocean, carrying hope and supplies to those who desperately needed them. The urgency was palpable. Every day, ships streamed into the harbor, battered and bruised, bearing the scars of battle. The pressure on the shipyard was immense, a relentless demand to fix them, refuel them, and send them back into the fray. Time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Every delay meant lives lost, supplies dwindled, and the enemy gained ground. The fate of the free world, it seemed, rested on the shoulders of these unsung workers, laboring day and night in the shadow of the looming conflict. One day, a critical ship, the Liberty Star, limped into port, its hull bearing the deep wounds of a simulated sea battle exercise. The damage was extensive, a testament to the brutal forces at play on the open ocean. Official assessments were grim. One area, a crucial support beam near the engine room, was deemed beyond repair. The damage was too severe, the structural integrity too compromised. The Liberty Star's mission was in jeopardy. Delaying her departure meant a critical blow to the Allied war effort. Peter, assigned to assess the damage, circled the Liberty Star slowly, his keen eyes scanning every inch of the mangled metal. He ran his hand along the twisted beam, feeling for weaknesses, searching for solutions. He noticed something the others had missed, a subtle flaw in the assessment, a potential avenue for repair. He believed he could fix the beam, using a specific welding technique, one that was considered unorthodox, even illegal, by naval standards. It was a technique he had developed himself, a method that pushed the boundaries of conventional welding. It was stronger, more resilient, but also untested and unproven in the eyes of the naval authorities. A moral dilemma gripped Peter. He could follow orders, adhere to regulations, and accept the official assessment. The ship would be delayed, perhaps for weeks, maybe even months. The consequences could be dire. Lives could be lost, supplies could run short, and the tide of the war could shift. Or he could defy protocol, risk reprimand even imprisonment, and attempt his illegal weld. He could potentially save the ship, save lives, and contribute to the war effort in a significant way. But he also risked failure, jeopardizing the ship and its crew. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, a heavy burden on his shoulders. What was he to do? The clock was ticking. The Liberty Star's departure date loomed large. Time was running out. Peter stared at the damaged beam, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do. He made his decision. He resolved to take action. Will Peter's gamble pay off, or will his defiance have devastating consequences? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to find out what happens next. Driven by his conscience and a deep-seated belief in his abilities, Peter began his secret work on the Liberty Star under the cloak of darkness. After the shipyard had quieted, when the only sounds were the creaks of the massive ships and the distant lapping of waves against the docks, he slipped back onto the vessel. He carried with him a small bag containing his specialized tools, each meticulously cleaned and prepared. His first task was the painstaking preparation of the damaged area. He ground away the fractured metal, smoothing the rough edges with practiced ease. Every spark that flew, every scrape of metal against metal, was a risk. He knew that any unexpected noise could draw unwanted attention. He worked with a quiet intensity, his movements precise and deliberate. The air hung thick with the smell of metal and oil, a familiar scent that both comforted and spurred him on. The welding technique Peter planned to use was unlike anything taught in the naval manuals. It involved a complex layering of different alloys, each chosen for its specific properties of strength, flexibility, and resistance to corrosion. He would fuse these metals together in a precise sequence, creating a weld that was not only stronger than the original beam but also better able to withstand the stresses of the open sea. He adjusted his welding mask, the familiar darkness shielding his eyes from the intense glare of the arc. The hum of the welding machine filled the air, a constant, rhythmic drone that accompanied his every move. With a steady hand, he began to lay down the first bead of weld, the molten metal flowing like liquid fire. He worked slowly, meticulously, building the weld layer by layer, each pass carefully overlapping the previous one. He monitored the temperature of the metal, adjusting his technique to ensure a perfect fusion. The risks were immense. If he was caught, he faced severe consequences. At best, he would be reprimanded and reassigned. At worst, he could be accused of sabotage, potentially facing imprisonment. But even more terrifying was the thought of the weld failing at sea. If his repair gave way under the stress of a storm or a U-boat attack, the Liberty Star could be lost, along with its crew and its vital cargo. The weight of this responsibility bore down on him, adding to the pressure he already felt. The departure date of the Liberty Star drew ever closer. The shipyard buzzed with activity as workers rushed to complete the remaining repairs and load the cargo. The pressure mounted on Peter as he raced against time to finish his secret work and conceal his actions. He knew he couldn't afford to make a single mistake. Overseeing the flurry of activity was Mr. Harrison, the strict shipyard foreman. He was a man of rigid adherence to rules and regulations. He had worked his way up through the ranks, earning his position through hard work and unwavering obedience to the naval code. He was a stickler for detail, known for his sharp eye and his zero tolerance for anything that deviated from the established procedures. He represented the very system that Peter was defying, a formidable obstacle in his path. Small clues began to suggest that Peter's actions were not going entirely unnoticed. A misplaced tool, left carelessly on the deck. A flicker of light seen late at night in the Liberty Star's engine room. A hushed conversation overheard in the mess hall. These subtle hints created a sense of unease, a feeling that he was being watched, that his secret was slowly unraveling. As he continued his work, Peter's internal struggle intensified. Doubts crept into his mind, whispering insidious questions. Was he truly doing the right thing? Was he being reckless, endangering the ship and its crew? He wrestled with the idea of confessing, of revealing his illegal weld to Mr. Harrison and the naval authorities. But he knew what the likely outcome would be. His weld would be rejected, the Liberty Star would be delayed, and he would face severe punishment. One evening, as Peter was carefully grinding down a rough spot on his weld, he noticed Mr. Harrison approaching the Liberty Star. The foreman's gaze was fixed on the damaged area, his brow furrowed in suspicion. Peter froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that Mr. Harrison's keen eye would not miss anything. The foreman was about to discover his secret. Mr. Harrison began a slow, deliberate inspection of the Liberty Star, his steps measured, his gaze unwavering. He ran his hand along the hull, feeling for imperfections, searching for signs of unauthorized work. He paused at the area where Peter had made his weld, his eyes narrowing. He circled the spot, examining it from every angle. He sensed that something was amiss. He focused his attention intently on the area, his suspicion growing with each passing moment. Mr. Harrison's investigation was methodical. He tapped the metal with a small hammer, listening intently to the resonance, searching for inconsistencies that might betray Peter's clandestine repair. He used a magnifying glass to scrutinize the surface, looking for telltale signs of welding that didn't match the official repair logs. The air crackled with tension as Peter watched from the shadows, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He knew that one wrong move, one slip-up, could expose everything. He risked a glance at Mr. Harrison's face. The foreman's expression was unreadable, a mask of professional scrutiny. But Peter could sense the growing suspicion in the set of his jaw, the tightening of his lips. Mr. Harrison knew something was different about this section of the hull. He just hadn't put his finger on it yet. Knowing he couldn't remain hidden for long, Peter made a daring move. Using his intimate knowledge of the shipyard's layout, he slipped through a maze of scaffolding and pipes, circling around to the other side of the Liberty Star. He hoped to create a distraction, to draw Mr. Harrison away from the critical area, even for a moment. He found a loose cable dangling near a stack of crates, and gave it a sharp tug. The crates wobbled precariously, threatening to topple over. The resulting commotion drew the attention of several nearby workers, including, as Peter had hoped, Mr. Harrison. "What's going on over there?" Mr. Harrison barked, his voice cutting through the din of the shipyard. He strode purposefully towards the commotion, his focus momentarily diverted from the area Peter had repaired. Seizing the opportunity, Peter darted back to the engine room, hoping to erase any lingering evidence of his unauthorized work. He quickly stowed away his tools, wiping down the area with a rag to remove any traces of grease or metal shavings. He knew it was a long shot, but he had to try. But it was too late. As he turned to leave, he saw Mr. Harrison standing in the doorway, his eyes blazing with anger. The foreman held a small piece of metal in his hand, a telltale sliver of the unconventional alloy Peter had used in his weld. "What is the meaning of this, Peter?" Mr. Harrison demanded, his voice low and dangerous. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "This isn't standard issue. This isn't on any of the repair manifests." Peter knew the game was up. He couldn't deny it any longer. He took a deep breath and met Mr. Harrison's gaze. "I repaired the beam, sir," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning inside him. Mr. Harrison's face darkened. "You repaired it? Without authorization? With this?" He held up the piece of metal again, his disgust palpable. "This is a clear violation of protocol, Peter. A direct defiance of orders." "I know, sir," Peter replied. "But the official assessment was wrong. The beam could be repaired. I knew I could do it. And you decided to take matters into your own hands?" Mr. Harrison scoffed. "You think you know better than the naval engineers? Than the regulations that are in place to ensure the safety of these ships and their crews?" "I only wanted to save the ship, sir," Peter pleaded. "To get her back into service as quickly as possible. I believe my weld is stronger, more reliable than any other possible repair." "That's not your decision to make," Mr. Harrison thundered. "You followed procedure. You obeyed orders. That's what keeps this shipyard running, that's what keeps these ships afloat." "But sir, with all due respect," Peter countered, his voice rising in passion, "the Liberty Star is vital to the war effort. Every day she's delayed, lives are at risk. I couldn't stand by and do nothing when I knew I could fix it." Mr. Harrison stood for a moment, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. He was torn between his duty to enforce regulations and the undeniable fact that Peter's weld looked remarkably solid. He understood the importance of the Liberty Star's mission, the urgency of the need for supplies in Europe. He knew that every delay could have devastating consequences. "I had to do something," Peter finished, his voice pleading. With a sigh, Mr. Harrison looked at Peter. "I must report this. This is out of my hands now." The following morning, naval investigators arrived at the shipyard. They were stern-faced men in crisp uniforms, their expressions conveying a mixture of skepticism and disapproval. Peter's fate, and perhaps the fate of the Liberty Star, now rested in their hands. Their assessment would determine whether he was a hero or a criminal. The naval engineers, led by a stern-faced Commander Davies, approached Peter's Weld with evident skepticism. Their initial assessment was far from positive. They circled the repaired beam, their eyes narrowed, their expressions conveying disapproval of the unorthodox technique. Commander Davies, a veteran of countless inspections, ran a gloved hand along the weld, his touch betraying a lack of confidence. "Unconventional, to say the least," he muttered to his colleague, Lieutenant Miller. "Against every regulation in the book." Lieutenant Miller, a younger engineer fresh out of Annapolis, nodded in agreement. "The layering technique is unheard of, sir. And the alloys, they're not on any of our approved lists." The engineers spent hours examining the weld, taking detailed measurements, and making copious notes. They used ultrasonic testing equipment to probe the internal structure, searching for flaws and inconsistencies. They subjected the weld to a battery of non-destructive tests, meticulously documenting every result. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Peter watched anxiously from a distance, his fate hanging in the balance. The next phase of the investigation involved rigorous physical testing. The engineers rigged up a complex system of hydraulic jacks and strain gauges, designed to simulate the immense stresses the Liberty Star would experience at sea during wartime conditions. They began to apply pressure to the weld, slowly increasing the load, carefully monitoring the strain gauges for any signs of weakness. The tests were designed to replicate the forces exerted by heavy seas, the vibrations caused by the ship's engines, and the potential impact of torpedoes or other explosive ordnance. The pressure mounted, the metal groaned, and the strain gauges flickered nervously. Peter held his breath, his eyes glued to the weld, willing it to hold. As the test continued, the engineers remained unsure. The weld was holding, but it was also behaving in unexpected ways. The unconventional layering technique seemed to be distributing the stress differently than a traditional weld. The alloys Peter had used were exhibiting unusual properties of elasticity and resilience. Commander Davies exchanged worried glances with Lieutenant Miller. "I don't like this," he said quietly. "It's too unpredictable. We can't risk putting this ship, and its crew, in harm's way based on an unproven technique." Lieutenant Miller nodded in agreement. "But, sir," he said hesitantly, "the numbers don't lie. The weld is withstanding significantly more stress than the original design specifications." "Numbers can be deceiving, Miller," Commander Davies retorted. "We need to be absolutely certain. This isn't some theoretical exercise. This is a matter of life and death." While the engineers deliberated, Mr. Harrison was called in to provide his testimony. He reluctantly admitted that Peter's weld appeared to be holding, despite being against regulations. He also spoke to Peter's character, describing him as a dedicated and skilled worker, albeit one prone to taking risks. "He's a good man, Commander," Mr. Harrison said. He's not afraid to think outside the box. He believes in what he does, and he's willing to go to great lengths to get the job done right." "But he violated protocol, Mr. Harrison," Commander Davies countered. "He defied orders. Can we trust a man who disregards the rules?" "I understand your concern, Commander," Mr. Harrison replied. "But I also believe that Peter acted out of a genuine desire to save the ship. He wasn't trying to be insubordinate. He was trying to be helpful." Next, Peter was given the opportunity to explain his actions to the investigators. He spoke passionately about his commitment to the war effort, his belief in his welding technique, and his conviction that he had done what was necessary to save the Liberty Star. "I know I broke the rules, Commander," Peter said, his voice earnest. "But I did it for the right reasons. I knew I could fix that beam, and I knew that every day the Liberty Star was delayed, lives were at risk. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." He went on to explain the science behind his methods. His explanation of the layering and alloys was cutting edge, but not yet common knowledge or approved. As Peter spoke, Lieutenant Miller's eyes widened. He recognized the innovative nature of Peter's technique, the potential for it to revolutionize welding in the naval industry. A detail emerged from Peter's explanation, a subtle nuance in the welding process, that caused Lieutenant Miller to reevaluate the entire situation. "Commander," Lieutenant Miller interjected, his voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. "I think we need to reconsider Peter's technique. It's radical, but it could be a game changer." Commander Davies frowned. "Are you suggesting we disregard established regulations based on a hunch?" "Miller?" "No, sir," Lieutenant Miller replied. "I'm suggesting we conduct one final test. An extreme test. One that will either prove Peter's actions were justified or condemn him beyond any doubt." Commander Davies paused, considering the implications. "All right, Miller," he said finally. "Let's see what this weld can really do. Prepare for the ultimate stress test." The stage was set for the extreme test. The Liberty Star sat in dry dock, surrounded by a hive of activity. Engineers swarmed over the repaired section, attaching sensors and reinforcing the surrounding structure. A hush fell over the shipyard as the hydraulic pumps whirred to life, slowly increasing the pressure on Peter's weld. Commander Davies, his face etched with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation, monitored the gauges with unwavering focus. Lieutenant Miller stood beside him, his eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. The pressure climbed steadily, inching towards the breaking point of the original design specifications. The metal groaned and creaked, a symphony of stress that echoed through the shipyard. Beads of sweat trickled down Peter's forehead as he watched the test unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. He had poured his heart and soul into this weld, and now everything hinged on its ability to withstand this ultimate trial. The pressure reached the original design limit and then surpassed it. The engineers exchanged nervous glances, their faces reflecting the growing tension. Commander Davies gave a curt nod, signaling the pumps to continue increasing the load. The numbers on the gauges climbed higher and higher, pushing the weld closer to its breaking point. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the shipyard. Everyone froze, their eyes darting to the weld. Had it failed? Had Peter's gamble backfired? A collective gasp went up from the onlookers as they braced for the inevitable collapse. But then, a remarkable thing happened. The weld held. It didn't break, it didn't crack, it didn't even show any signs of significant stress. The pressure continued to climb, exceeding all expectations. The engineers stared in disbelief, their initial skepticism replaced by awe and amazement. Commander Davies shook his head in disbelief. "Incredible," he muttered. "I've never seen anything like it." Lieutenant Miller, his eyes shining with excitement, ran some quick calculations on his slide rule. "Sir," he exclaimed, "the weld is holding at nearly double the original design specifications." The extreme test continued for several more minutes, pushing the weld to its absolute limits. But it refused to yield. It stood strong and defiant, a testament to Peter's skill and ingenuity. Finally, Commander Davies called a halt to the test. "That's enough," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "There's no need to push it any further. It's clear that Peter's weld is not only structurally sound but significantly stronger than the original design." A wave of relief washed over Peter as he heard the verdict. He had done it. He had proven that his illegal weld was not only safe but superior. He had saved the Liberty Star. The investigators declared that Peter was exonerated. They praised his ingenuity, his dedication, and his unwavering commitment to the war effort. He was hailed as a local hero at the shipyard, his name whispered with respect and admiration. News of Peter's weld spread like wildfire throughout the naval community. Engineers and officers alike marveled at his unconventional technique and its remarkable strength. The incident sparked a reevaluation of existing welding practices and safety regulations, leading to the adoption of new and improved methods across the fleet. Even Mr. Harrison, the strict shipyard foreman, underwent a change of heart. He approached Peter with a contrite expression, offering his sincere apologies for his initial skepticism. "I was wrong, Peter," Mr. Harrison admitted. "I was so focused on following the rules that I failed to see the potential in your work. You saved the Liberty Star, and you taught me a valuable lesson." He then offered Peter his full support. With Peter's Weld deemed a success, the Liberty Star was cleared for departure. The ship was loaded with its vital cargo, its crew eager to set sail and contribute to the Allied war effort. As the Liberty Star steamed out of the harbor, Peter watched from the docks, a sense of pride and accomplishment swelling in his chest. He knew that his illegal Weld would play a crucial role in the battles to come. But even as he celebrated his victory, Peter couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. He knew that the Atlantic was teeming with German U-boats, lurking beneath the waves, waiting to pounce on unsuspecting convoys. The Liberty Star was heading straight into harm's way. Would Peter's Weld be enough to protect her from the dangers that lay ahead? The threat was ever present. The Liberty Star sliced through the choppy Atlantic waters, a gray ghost against the turbulent sky. The crew, a mix of seasoned sailors and fresh-faced recruits, went about their duties with a nervous energy. They knew the risks they faced, the ever-present threat of German U-boats lurking beneath the waves. The Convoy, a cluster of merchant ships and escort vessels, steamed steadily towards Europe, each vessel carrying vital supplies for the Allied war effort. But they were entering a danger zone, a known U-boat hot spot where enemy submarines frequently patrolled. Tension mounted as the hours ticked by. The lookouts strained their eyes, scanning the horizon for any sign of a periscope or a telltale wake in the water. The sonar operators listened intently for the telltale ping of an enemy submarine. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable sense of dread hanging over the convoy. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the silence. "Torpedo in the water! Torpedo in the water!" The frantic cry echoed through the Liberty Star, sending the crews scrambling to their battle stations. A German U-boat had launched its deadly payload. Chaos erupted as the ships scattered, desperately trying to evade the incoming torpedoes. The escort vessels raced to intercept the attack, dropping depth charges in an attempt to deter the submarine. The Liberty Star, a lumbering giant, was slow to maneuver, making it an easy target. A torpedo streaked through the water, leaving a trail of bubbles in its wake. It was heading straight for the Liberty Star. The crew braced for impact, their faces etched with fear. There was nothing they could do but wait and hope. With a deafening explosion, the torpedo struck the Liberty Star, slamming into the hull with tremendous force. The ship shuddered violently, throwing men off their feet. A geyser of water erupted from the impact zone, showering the deck with debris. The torpedo had hit the Liberty Star in a vulnerable spot, directly in the area where Peter had made his illegal Weld. It was the ultimate test of his repair, a moment of truth that would determine the fate of the ship and its crew. For a terrifying moment, everything hung in the balance. The ship groaned and creaked, its structure straining under the immense pressure. The crew held their breath, waiting to see if the Weld would hold. Then, slowly but surely, the Liberty Star began to stabilize. The shuddering subsided, the groaning faded, and the ship remained afloat. Peter's Weld had held. It had withstood the full force of the torpedo impact, preventing a catastrophic breach of the hull. A collective cheer erupted from the crew as they realized they had survived. They had faced death and emerged victorious, thanks to the ingenuity and skill of a forgotten repairman. Peter's illegal Weld had saved their lives. The Liberty Star limped along, battered but not broken. The crew worked tirelessly to assess the damage and make temporary repairs. They patched up the holes in the hull, shored up weakened bulkheads, and restored essential systems. The ship was wounded, but it was still afloat, still capable of carrying out its mission. As the Liberty Star continued its journey, the crew reflected on the events that had just transpired. They had faced the ultimate test, and they had survived. They owed their lives to Peter and his illegal Weld. "That crazy welder saved us," one sailor said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never thought that thing would hold, but it did. It's a miracle. He's a hero," another sailor added. "He should get a medal for what he did." The Liberty Star eventually reached its destination, delivering its vital cargo to the Allied forces in Europe. The supplies were desperately needed, and their arrival boosted morale and helped to sustain the war effort. Peter's Weld had played a crucial role in ensuring the success of the mission. But even as the Liberty Star reached safe harbor, the threat remained. The U-boat that had attacked the convoy was still active in the area, prowling the depths, searching for its next victim. Another convoy would attempt the crossing soon, facing the same dangers, the same risks. The battle for the Atlantic was far from over. Back at the shipyard, Peter resumed his work, the atmosphere around him noticeably different. He was no longer just another face in the crowd, an anonymous cog in the war machine. He was a respected figure, a source of inspiration. To his colleagues, fellow welders sought his advice, eager to learn from his innovative techniques. Supervisors deferred to his judgment, recognizing his unique understanding of metal and its properties. He was tasked with training other welders in his unconventional method. This was a significant step, a formal acknowledgement of the value of his work. He spent hours demonstrating his layering technique, explaining the importance of alloy selection, and emphasizing the need for precision and attention to detail. He stressed that his method was not a shortcut, but a carefully calculated approach that required both skill and understanding. One afternoon, a coded message arrived at the shipyard, relayed through official channels. It was a brief, terse communication, but its meaning was clear. The Liberty Star had reached its destination safely, delivering its vital supplies to the Allied forces. A wave of relief washed over Peter. He had done his part. His illegal weld had held, protecting the ship and its crew from harm. But even as he celebrated this victory, Peter knew that the war was far from over. Other ships, other convoys, would face the same dangers, the same risks. The threat of German U-boats remained a constant menace in the Atlantic. He couldn't afford to rest on his laurels. He had to continue innovating, continue improving his techniques, to ensure that future ships were even better protected. Meanwhile, Allied naval forces were actively engaged in a desperate hunt for the U-boat that had attacked the Liberty Star. The attack had highlighted the vulnerability of the convoys and the effectiveness of the German submarine tactics. Eliminating this U-boat became a top priority, a crucial step in securing the vital supply lines across the Atlantic. Weeks turned into months. Allied destroyers, corvettes, and aircraft relentlessly patrolled the waters, searching for any sign of the elusive U-boat. They deployed sonar buoys, conducted aerial reconnaissance, and coordinated their efforts in a complex and dangerous game of cat and mouse. Finally, after a prolonged and arduous search, the U-boat was located. A British destroyer, the HMS Valiant, detected the submarine's sonar signature and launched a series of depth charges. The U-boat attempted to evade the attack, diving deep and maneuvering frantically. But the HMS Valiant was relentless, continuing to drop depth charges until the U-boat was forced to surface. A fierce battle ensued. The U-boat's crew fought valiantly, firing its deck guns and torpedoes in a desperate attempt to defend itself. But the HMS Valiant was too powerful. The destroyer unleashed a barrage of gunfire, crippling the U-boat and forcing its crew to abandon ship. The U-boat sank beneath the waves, taking with it the lives of its crew and its deadly threat to the Allied convoys. News of the U-boat's destruction spread quickly throughout the Allied naval forces. The sinking was hailed as a major victory, a significant blow against the German submarine campaign. The sailors who manned the convoys breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that the waters were now a little safer. Word of Peter's weld on the Liberty Star spread too, traveling along with the convoys. The story became legend, a testament to the ingenuity and bravery of the shipyard workers back home. Sailors touched the welds on their ships, feeling a sense of confidence knowing these repairs had been born of Peter's innovation. Back at the shipyard, Peter continued to refine his welding techniques, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But new challenges were on the horizon. Reports began to surface of new, faster German U-boats entering service in the Atlantic. These advanced submarines were more difficult to detect, more maneuverable, and more heavily armed. The Allied forces needed to adapt, to develop new strategies and technologies to counter this evolving threat. Peter knew that he, too, would have to innovate, to find new ways to protect the ships that carried vital supplies across the ocean. What new challenges will Peter face in the ever-escalating war? the tide of the war began to turn. Allied forces pushed deeper into Europe, liberating occupied territories and driving back the German army. The need for constant convoys across the Atlantic gradually diminished. The intensity of the U-boat threat lessened, and the once perilous sea lanes became relatively safer. Finally, the news that the world had longed to hear arrived: the war in Europe was over. The shipyards, once bustling hubs of frantic activity, slowly began to wind down. The urgency that had driven the workers for so long dissipated, replaced by a sense of weary relief. The Liberty Stars, the Victory ships, and all the other vessels that had carried the hopes of the free world across the ocean, were no longer needed in such great numbers. Peter, too, felt the shift. The pressure eased, the long hours became less frequent, and the atmosphere in the shipyard became more relaxed. He continued to work with metal, but his focus shifted from wartime repairs to peacetime construction. He used his skills to rebuild infrastructure, to construct bridges, buildings, and other essential structures that would help to heal the wounds of war. His innovative welding techniques, once deemed illegal and unorthodox, were now widely adopted by industries around the world. Engineers, architects, and construction workers recognized the superior strength and reliability of his methods, incorporating them into their designs and practices. Peter's legacy extended far beyond the naval shipyard, improving safety and efficiency in countless applications. Bridges stood stronger, buildings rose taller, and pipelines transported resources more securely, all thanks to the ingenuity of a forgotten repairman. Peter's story serves as a reminder that courage and innovation can make a significant difference, even in the face of overwhelming odds. He had been an ordinary man, working in obscurity, but his dedication, his willingness to challenge the status quo, and his unwavering belief in his own abilities had allowed him to achieve extraordinary things. He embodied the spirit of ingenuity, the drive to find new and better ways of doing things. He demonstrated the importance of standing up for what you believe is right, even when it means defying authority or risking personal safety. He showed how one person's actions, no matter how small they may seem, can have a lasting impact on the world. In the years that followed the war, Peter continued to work with metal, using his skills to contribute to the post-war recovery. He never sought fame or fortune, content to live a quiet life, surrounded by his family and his work. But his legacy lived on, in the countless structures that stood stronger and safer because of his innovations. Peter's illegal weld had not only saved a convoy from disaster but also helped to reshape the landscape of naval engineering and wartime logistics. His forgotten act of bravery was now remembered and celebrated, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the importance of recognizing the contributions of unsung heroes. He continued to quietly work, knowing that the ships, bridges, and buildings he helped create would stand as monuments to his ingenuity. The story of Peter and the Liberty Star is a testament to the power of innovation, the importance of courage, and the enduring impact that one person can have on the world. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, hope can be found in the most unexpected places, and that even the most ordinary individuals can achieve extraordinary things. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story of unsung heroism during World War II. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel for more historical stories of innovation and bravery. Check out our other video about World War II innovation. And be sure to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on the story. What did you think about Peter's decision to make the illegal weld? Let us know in the comments.